Hi, I'm Sam Williams. I am a songwriter, producer, music historian, multi instrumentalist. Other a lot of interesting things about me that separate me from everybody else, and you'll learn about that all in this interview. So
Cool.
yeah,
So thank you, Sam, for being
of
on
course,
Behind the Birk video sessions.
yeah,
So let's talk about your upbringing first.
okay.
So how did you get into music? Did you into music at a young age,
Well,
or?
yeah, I mean, it's funny because when I was a kid, I was torn between either being a cartoonist or being a musician. When I was a kid, I was really, really into classic cartoons, and I was into several different types of classic cartoons. And at one point, I was considering being an animator, but then I got into music. I picked up the bass, and then I picked up the guitar, and then I was like, you know what, like this is really what I'm passionate about. So, I gave up being wanting to be a cartoonist and decided to be a musician. So that's kind of what happened with that. But I've always been to music. Ever since I was like like 12, 13, 14 years old. It's just that it wasn't until a lot older until I started to realize how gifted I am. So
Hmm.
yeah.
When did you give up being a cartoonist?
You know what? I think it was probably shit. I think it was probably when I was in middle school.
Hmm.
So is when I kind of gave up on it because I just like, I realized that I was a lot better at being a musician than I was a cartoonist.
Hmm.
So that's why I decided to be a musician instead. So
Yeah. And did you enjoy being a musician more than being a cartoonist,
yeah,
or
yeah,
just?
for the most part. Because I mean, it's just but like I said, I didn't realize how exactly how talented I was as a musician until I was in high school. So
Hmm.
yeah.
And how did you get started with music?
Well, I first picked up playing the bass, but I didn't really start seriously writing songs until I was in high school when I was about 16 years old. And when I was in high school, I took classes at this place called the Songwriting School of Los Angeles in Burbank, and I think I wrote my first song like in 2011, so I'd have been like 15 or 16, and it's funny because back then, I at the time I was taking private songwriting lessons with a guy named Phil Cody, and Phil Cody wrote a ton of hits with Neil Sedaka, lots and lots of Laugh in the Rain, Solitaire, just a lot of hits with him, and he kind of mentored me into showing me like basic things like songwriting structure and whatnot, and just sort of bet how to get my emotions out and put that into lyrics,
Hmm.
stuff like that, is and that was when I was in and that was when I was in high school. So that's when I really started to seriously write songs. But I before that I was more serious about being a bass player, because actually I'm a bass player first, songwriter second. I picked up the bass when I was around like 12 or 13, and I discovered James Jamerson, who's still one of my favorite bass players of all time, and I was learning a lot of his bass lines and figuring out how challenging he was as a bass player, and but then once I started to write songs, bass playing kind of got put on the back burner. But then, as a songwriter, I started to develop like things like song structure and stuff like
Hmm.
that. So
Yeah, cool. So, you're a songwriter second, but what's the songwriting process for you like?
it's funny. I it's interesting you asked that, because when I was around that age, I was coming up with stuff left and right. I mean, I was I was coming up with lots and lots of songs. But nowadays, it's the songwriting inspiration is few and far in between. But usually, when it comes to writing songs, it starts with the title for me. Actually, I mean, honestly, like the first thing, a lot of times the system that's worked for me is that I write the whole song lyrically first, and then I put on the music after that. Usually the first thing that'll pop into my head is the title, and then usually once I have the title, the song will pretty much write itself from there. You know, it might take me a couple of days to to finish up the whole lyric, but once I
Mhm.
have the title, I'll have the chorus, and then I'll have the verses, and then I'll have the pre-chorus, and then basically the whole song will be written from there, so
Mhm.
usually it for me, for the most part, it like the first thing that pops up into my head is the title, and then I'll at least have four or five different lines for the chorus, so.
Who are your songwriting
Oh
inspirations?
my God. It's funny. A lot of people, unlike most people in my age group, I grew up listening to a lot of oldies from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And when I was a kid, because I used to listen to this radio station called Careth 101, and they used to play tons and tons of oldies from those three eras. But when I was a kid, I specifically gravitated towards music from the 60s. And when I was a kid, I fell in love with all these really great songs. I've always wanted to learn, like who are the people behind the music, like who wrote these songs, who produced them, who are the musicians,
Yeah.
what studios these songs are recorded at. So I did a lot of research about songs from that era, and the really unique thing about me is that I have a really good understanding of music history. I know about like how music was recorded back then. I know what the business was like back then, but I also have I know about the people behind the music. I know who wrote these songs, who produced them, who are the musicians, like who are the engineers those studio songs are recorded at. All those behind the scenes details is what I really is something that I did a lot of research on. It's something I cultivated, and it's amazing because I literally have photographic memory. If you know any hit song from the '60s, I can tell you like basically everything about it. So
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing. A lot of people my age don't have that because they weren't exposed to a lot of that music from back then. They grew up listening to other stuff, but that's kind of my background.
Yeah. That's cool. Like, who in specific did you
Well,
listen to a
well,
lot
I
of?
mean,
Like the
it's
most?
funny because my three favorite my four favorite songwriters are Burt Bacharach and Hal David and Jimmy Webb and Brian Wilson. But in terms of other, some of my favorite bands, the Rascals, the Righteous Brothers, the Buckinghams, the Turtles, Love and Spoonful. I love all the British Invasion stuff, so the Yardbirds, the Hollies, the Animals, Dave Clark Five, the Zombies, the Kinks, a lot of that, and also like the Mamas and Papas, Paul Revere and the Raiders Association, Gary Lewis and the Playboys, Gary Puck and Union Gap. I mean, I can literally go on forever.
Wow.
As you can see,
Yeah.
classics for it's just like there's so many. I mean, it's yeah, Mitch Royer and the Detroit Wheels. Yeah, there's a lot. Trust me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, what are you working on now?
Well, I decided to take all of this encyclopedic knowledge of music from this era, and decided to create a platform in which I can share this knowledge. And it's sad because there's just so much great music from back then, and there's just a lot of people my age are very unfamiliar with. Like if you ask anyone else my age, like, hey, like what's your favorite like Gene Pitney song? They'd be like, Gene Pitney, I don't know who that is. So basically, what I'm trying to do is with this, and then basically, I'm trying to change that by creating a platform in which I'm educating people around my age around this music, and I decided to do that by creating a podcast. And basically, what I've been up to right now is I'm trying to build as much content for that podcast as I possibly can. So basically, the way the podcast works is I take a song from an artist from the '60s and talk about my opinion, and then I dive into the history behind it. I talk about who wrote the song, who produced it, who played on it, just all the basic facts about it. So that way, you're learning about it as well as you're getting a young man's perspective on this because. I'm not a baby boomer. I'm not in my 50s and 60s, but I'm young, so I have a little bit of a different perspective on this
Hmm.
music. But I know what makes it really good, and I know why a lot of people would be able to like it. So
That's cool. That's
yeah.
awesome. How do you think about like doing a podcast on that?
Well, it's funny because the story behind that is that I was the place I used to take music classes at the Songwriting School of Los Angeles. I was thinking about the whole idea of me starting a podcast came from the head of the school because I talked to him about possibly teaching like a workshop over there on '60s music like history, And then when I had a conversation with him about this, it kind of towards the end he said that a good idea for me would be to start a podcast instead. And I thought, and after I gave it some thought, I decided to do it because one, they're really popular nowadays. A lot of people are listening to them, and two, it's mostly most of the target demographic for people that are listening to the podcast are mostly people our age. And I thought, what, well, since that's what I want, that's who I would want to listen to my podcast. I thought that'd be cool just to, basically, I thought that'd be a good platform, to educate, my knowledge on this music from, because I wouldn't necessarily want, people my parents' age to listen to it, because I want people around my age who are super unfamiliar with songs from that era to listen to it. So, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. So, are you working on anything like songwriting, or are you?
Yeah, a little bit here and there. I mean, it's funny because I'm trying to manage my time between my podcast and my music, because I feel like that one's kind of overpowering the other, because it's like I spend so much time on my podcast, picking out the song, writing up the script, and recording it, that sometimes I forget to work on the music. But like I said before, in terms of songwriting, I used to come up with stuff left and right, but nowadays it's the inspiration doesn't come as quickly as it used to, or sometimes it takes me forever to finish songs, but usually when I have a really good song, I'm really excited about, I usually try to record it, because I'm a producer too, so I have a home studio, so I'm usually able to do it myself. So
let's look at that home studio.
Yeah, right? Seriously.
Cool. Oh my god.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, let's show this off a little bit.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So, it's a good keyboard.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so what are you gonna play for us today?
Well, I think I might as well share what inspires me to write my songs, because what inspires me to write my songs is that how do I explain this? In terms of what inspires me to write my songs is that a lot of times I have a really difficult time establishing a decent, a really good relationship with the girl, to the point where we're not just friends, we're in a romantic relationship. Because a lot of times I get rejected. The girl tells me that, she just wants to be friends, or, I don't, she ignores my texts and calls, or, she picks another guy over me. And to me, that's very frustrating. And whenever that happens, I decide to take all of my frustration on just my, lack of inability to get into a romantic relationship, and turn that into a song, because it's frustrating, because a lot of times I'm like, well, am I doing something wrong? Is it me, or is it somebody else? Is it and a lot of times, I take all those feelings and emotions and put that into a song, and I feel like, there's a lot of songs written about, falling in love and then falling out of love, but the unique angle I have with my music is that I write songs about, the challenges of actually getting a girlfriend or a boyfriend versus just being in a relationship already and getting over somebody, because to be honest with you, I've never had a girlfriend, and, so I've never been in a relationship before, so, but I know what it's like, when to get rejected, first of all, and two, to have the girl that you really, really like pick somebody else over you, or ignore your text, and, just not getting the girl. And I now, getting the girl hasn't happened for me yet, but I know, I hope it does, one day. But this next song I'll play for you, it's a new one for me. I haven't recorded this one yet or copyrighted it yet, but it's a song that it's very personal for me, and I think a lot of other, people will be able to relate to it. It's called "I Wish I Can Picture Myself Being With You." One, two, 1, 2, 3. I wish I can picture myself being with you. I wish there was a way to connect you and I, so that 1 + 1 can equal 2. I wish you were here, but there's nothing that I can do. If only I can picture myself being with you. The image of us together is blurred in my mind. 'Cause when you have your heart set on, just won't say goodbye. I guess you'll have a way of knowing if we're not meant to be. 'Cause you picked another set of arms, so run to it and know that it's not me. I know it's not possible for him to get out of your way. And since I don't wanna mess with what you got going, this is all I have to say. I wish I could picture myself being with you. I wish there was a way to connect you and I, so that 1 + 1 can equal 2. I wish you were here, but there's nothing that I can do. If only I can picture myself being with you. And there's a chance that it might not work out at all. Well, I'll be on the top of your list as to who we can call. If you're in too deep in what you have, then it's going strong. Then I guess there's not a single thing I can do right now except for move on. I know it's not possible for him to get out of your way. And since I don't wanna mess with what you got going, this is all I have to say. I wish I could picture myself being with you. I wish there was a way to connect you and I, so that 1 + 1 can equal 2. I wish you were here, but there's nothing that I can do. If only I can picture myself being with you. I wish I could picture myself being with you. I wish there was a way to connect you and I, so that 1 + 1 can equal 2. I wish you were here, and there's nothing that I can do. If only I can picture myself being with you. If only I can picture myself being with you. If only I can picture myself